We had a cabin on Stump Island. People think if you're in a cabin community, everybody's friendly. But that's not the vibe of that area.
It was a place where things happened. Bad things.
When she got to the cabin, she really got nervous. There were rumors galore. But naturally, nobody saw anything.
That cabin holds an awful lot of secrets.
On April 14th, 1981, 18-year-old Jody Bossman did not come home to her parents' house. Her parents became concerned. They did some checking through the school she was going to.
She was a student of cosmetology in Dubuque, and she was supposed to be at its class that morning, but she did not show up.
She was very committed to her training at the cosmetology school, and so when they found out that she didn't show up for school that day, they suspected something was seriously wrong.
Her mother and father were panicked. They started making phone calls to Jody's friends.
On April 13th, I was raking the yard. Her house is just 2 houses down the street, and I saw Jody get in her blue AMC Hornet with her friend, and she turned around and waved at me, waved back, and she left, and that's the last I saw her.
When it became obvious to Jody's parents they could not get any answers, they went to the police department and filed a missing person report. It piqued the interest of the Dubuque Police Department because 4 months before Jody disappeared, on December 10th of 1980, a body of a woman was found abandoned along a roadway in rural Grant County, just a few miles over the bridge from Dubuque, Iowa.
I got a call that there was an African-American female that was discovered by a road worker. Her body was half naked, laying along the roadway. We had no idea who she was.
She had a pair of pantyhose on and an overcoat, and her body appeared to be dumped from a moving vehicle. Her shoes were on each side of the road.
Her clothes are in a state of disarray. They thought it was likely that she had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled.
One of the things that helped on the case was they found her purse along the Mississippi downstream from a group of few small cabins on the north end of Stump Island.
These cabins are on a sand island in the Mississippi River. Very, very isolated.
They're pretty rustic. Power and sewer and water are usually non-existent on the islands. It's not the kind of place that you can probably spend a lot of time relaxing. It's more for sportsmen, hunting, fishing, and unfortunately sometimes for partying too. It is a very isolated spot, but that's what some people are looking for. In the purse found along the Mississippi, south of Stump Island, there was an identification card. And that's how they ended up leading the identification to the unknown Jane Doe.
The Jane Doe was identified ultimately as Thomasina Donovan, 22 years old, single mother of a 4-year-old.
Thomasina was so happy and so outgoing. And, you know, that was my big sister, so I looked up to her. She loved to sing and dance. We danced all the time. Thomasina was 10 when my mom passed away from breast cancer. Thomasina took over my mom's spot, and she would take care of us, good care of us. Growing up was tough, but, you know, we made it through. Last time I talked to Thomasina, she had told me she was going to go and try and make some money for her daughter, because she ain't got nothing for Christmas. Thomasina had no money. Times were hard, and she had to resort to prostitution to try to get some money for her daughter. You know, she wasn't a bad person. She was a nice and good person. Thomasina was doing what she had to do for her baby, you know. She didn't have nobody else. I said, you gotta be careful, you know, it's dangerous. On December 10, the police notified the family. She had passed me, and I felt so bad because I wasn't there for her. I felt that I let her down. I was kind of mad too, you know, because I didn't know what had happened.
Although DNA evidence examination was at its early stages in that time of the 1980s, they took samples from her body and from her clothing.
They did preserve a wealth of evidence, but that evidence in and of itself was not enough to be able to point to her killer.
Dubuque is a large city, but in the 1980s, that would be unusual to have two young women, one missing and one murdered, that close in time, that close to each other in location. Those two similarities alone made investigators stand up and look at these cases very, very seriously. They were concerned that maybe these could be connected, and they fear that you have a serial killer on the loose in your community.
Jody was a childhood friend. She was sassy. She knew who she was and what she wanted.
She's always happy. Just a delight to be around. We both had a love for music. We listened to albums all the time. She played flute at Hempstead High School, where we both went.
On April 14th, 1981, I was 17 years old, and I was getting ready that morning to go to school. And on the radio, they said that Jody Bousman was missing. And the first thought in my head was, it was something bad had happened.
Jennifer Nealon was a friend of Jody's and was with her the night before she was missing. When Dubuque Police Department officers interviewed Jody's parents, they were informed that Jody was going to be staying at Jennifer Nealon's home that night.
The police interviewed Nealon, and Nealon gave a full statement.
Jennifer informed law enforcement that Jennifer and Jody were in Jennifer's house all night, but around 11:30, they decided to go to a bar locally in Dubuque called Kelly's Cove and order a pizza.
Kelly's Cove at the time was a tough guy bar. It was a bar where where things happened. Bad things.
They were playing pool, having a good time, and socializing with friends. Later that evening, Jennifer decided to go home, but Jody wanted to stay at the bar. Jody was going to stay at Jennifer's house that night. So Jennifer had anticipated that Jody would be arriving at her house later that night.
Jennifer left the door unlocked for her, but when she got up in the morning, Jody was not there.
It all rang true. There was nothing that she said that seemed to be inconsistent.
According to Jennifer Nealon, there was a male there at the same time that Jody was playing pool. She did not know this person's name. She referred to him as a stranger. He was acting very odd and talking suggestively to Jody and made her feel uncomfortable.
He started hitting on Jody, wanting to know if she could fall in love with a guy like him. She kind of blew him off. He was just acting like a creep.
Law enforcement had to look at this person as a potential suspect. They were hoping that maybe you find this stranger, maybe you find Jody. Dubuque Police Department investigators interviewed the owner of Kelly's Cove.
Turns out the guy had cashed a check there for $10, and his identification was on that check.
From the check from Kelly's Cove, they were able to identify the stranger as Joel Graves.
What they found out about him was he was from the Chicago area, and he was a traveling salesman.
Graves had recently been in Cedar Rapids, and they also had a recent missing person case. Cedar Rapids is about 72 miles away from Dubuque. That's considered pretty close proximity. This is somebody that needs to be looked at very, very closely.
On April 24th, while the police were looking at Joel Graves, Jennifer Nealon got a call from a man named Mike Schaefer, who said he would like to meet with her.
Mike was one of the men that was playing pool with Jody Bossman the night she went missing. He told Jennifer that he had some information about Jody that he wanted to share with her.
They set up a meeting. And she called the police.
As a law enforcement officer, you have to ask, what is Mike Schaefer's intent? Is he trying to find out what she knows? It's just a very peculiar and yet very dangerous situation. The last thing you'd want her to do is meet alone with somebody that could be involved with a disappearance. The police department of Dubuque made it very clear that she was not to go meet him.
They never met, and so I don't know what information he was going to tell her. But then it was a question of trying to find out everybody else who was in Kelly's Cove that night.
According to witnesses, Jody was playing pool with 3 regulars to that bar: Randy Romberg, Greg Otterback, and Mike Schaefer. They were playing pool that night with a man who was handing out cigars, celebrating a child recently being born.
Romberg, Otterbeck, and Schaefer were all brought in and questioned individually.
All 3 of those individuals had similar stories. Romberg and Schaefer were playing pool that night at Kelly's Cove, and Jody played pool with them.
Otterbeck said he left and went home.
Right around 12:30 a.m., Romberg and Schaefer left the bar with Jody in Randy Romberg's car and drove around in the area for a while.
According to Romberg, they were driving around, and Jody said she wanted to be left up at the Walnut Tavern. So he drove her up there, let her out, never saw her again. However, What was strange is that Jody's friends and parents were asked about Jody ever mentioning the walnut, and they said no, she never mentioned the walnut.
So it was inconsistent with what Jody's friends and colleagues knew about her, that she would not have been dropped off in that area.
Now that Romberg and Schaefer admitted they had Jody in the car driving around, so that right away eliminated Graves. Once Graves is eliminated, the police start focusing on Romberg, Otterbeck, and Schaefer.
The Dubuque Police Department conducted search warrants on the men's vehicles and residencies for any potential evidence that connects them to the disappearance of Jody.
Unfortunately, they found nothing.
One of the things they were thinking about is, where would the potential crime scene be? Where would a potential crime have occurred if it's not connected to their vehicles and or to their residence? They were focusing on trying to develop leads on where did they actually go and what actually happened. On April 23rd, law enforcement received a call. The woman making the call said that someone resembling Jody's description was actually staying in a trailer house with a young man approximately 20 miles from Dubuque near Platteville, Wisconsin. You can imagine how officers were looking at this. You're hoping that she's still alive and safe. Law enforcement put together a team to go check whether or not it was actually Jody there, and if she was she being held against her will? But when law enforcement got there, the young woman who was there was approximately 19 years old, had a similar physical description to Jody Bosman, but it positively was not her. That lead ended up being closed out.
May 10th, which was Mother's Day, I get a call. The captain of the Spirit of Dubuque, which is a dinner riverboat, spotted a body on the Illinois side of the river.
As they approached it, it turned out to be a body of a female, just downriver from Stump Island.
The body was had been in the water for a couple weeks or more.
Until a body is actually found and identified, even seasoned law enforcement officers always have a bit of hope that they're able to find a missing person. But when you find a body in the area where the victim was last seen, in your gut, you know that it's probably not going to be good news. The female's body was in a state of decomposition, but there was a pink t-shirt on the victim, and that was the color of the shirt that was last seen on Jody Bosman on the night she went missing. At this point in the investigation, that's where you realize you have to get the family back involved again to do an identification. And that's probably one of the most difficult things you can do in law enforcement.
The body was transported to the morgue at Mercy Hospital. She had identifiable rings on, a watch, and some other jewelry, earrings, and her mother came down to the morgue and identified those items.
I can't conceive of anything much harder for a parent than to have to see your child's body in a decomposing state.
She was very distraught. I think she had hopes that her daughter was alive. From then on in her life, the only thing that she remembers, I'm sure, on Mother's Day is having to identify her daughter. Terrible thing.
Once Jody's body was found, it was just numb, shock, sadness. You never really do get over it. I went down by the lock and dam and just sat on the bank. Just kind of cried it out. Just bawled until I didn't have any more tears.
I remember Jody's funeral. It was the first time that I've ever saw a funeral where there was just a picture. And it was like, wow. It was sad to know that she was in the river, because I know what the river can do to things and to people.
Now that they've got a body, the police are all over everybody, really working hard.
The autopsy indicated definitively that her voice box had been crushed. We knew at that point she had been strangled. Now we have a murder investigation. The main suspects in this case were Randy Romberg, Greg Otterbeck, and Michael Schaefer. And the reason, of course, was that that's who Jody was last seen with at Kelly's Cove.
The Dubuque Police Department had conducted search warrants, but nothing solid came out of any of those search warrants.
However, it was always rumored. There was a lot of bad situations that happened around those people.
It was reported a woman had stated to others that Randy had sexually assaulted her. She supposedly was going for a drive with him. She was taken to this cabin on Stump Island. She tried to get away, and he chased her and got her and dragged her back, took her into the cabin, and forced her to have sex with him. But she never called the police about it because she didn't think anything would be done about it, and because she was so scared of Romberg.
That's obviously an incredible lead, and there's now focus on this cabin on Stump Island.
We had a cabin on Stump Island. People think if you're in a cabin community, you know everybody and everybody's friendly. But that's not the vibe of that area. It was a fun place to go. But if you walked beyond your safety area, it could be creepy. I'm not saying that bad, evil things were happening out there. It's just the feeling that you had. It was a creepy, creepy space.
There were rumors galore. There always seemed to be parties around this house. A lot of drinking, drugs, sexual encounters, but naturally, nobody saw anything. It makes it very hard for the police because everybody you talk to gives a different story.
Investigators continued to develop leads on our three suspects. And along with that, information came in that a fourth man was with him that night.
There was a fourth person involved that we had not been investigating at all. An individual by the name of Robert Miller. He was a person that we really wanted to talk to. Robert Miller was brought into the law center, and he admitted to being there at the time. Robert Miller, at this point, is going to be either a witness or a participant. Yet to be determined.
On May 30th, 1981, law enforcement officers speak with Robert Miller. He came forward with information that he had been holding on to since the night that Jody went missing.
We believed at that particular time, after interviewing Robert Miller, that he was the absolute key to the whole entire investigation. On the 13th of April, 1981, Robert Miller said that he was in Kelly's Cove, playing pool and just enjoying the evening.
He said that he knew Schaefer, Romberg, and Otterbeck, but not that well. He wasn't that close to them.
Even though Miller was extremely intoxicated that night, he was able to tell law enforcement everything that he saw happen.
Robert Miller stated that the four of them, along with Jody Bousman, left Kelly's Cove about 12:30.
They went to Schaefer's apartment and got a joint, and they smoked it and drove around. Randy Romberg had said Jody wanted to be left off at the Walnut Tavern, but Miller's statement was, that's not what happened. Jody just thought they were going to get a joint at Schaefer's. But they started heading across the bridge into Wisconsin towards Stump Island. Jody said she wanted to be let out. She wanted to go home. And they talked her into it, said, no, we're just going to go play some cards, drink a little bit, blah, blah, blah.
Eventually, they ended up at the cabin of Romberg's brother on Stump Island.
When she got to the cabin, she really got nervous.
Jody did not want to go in. This cabin was right out of a horror movie. It's a horrible, horrible place. So isolated and run down.
Inside, they were drinking, playing cards, and generally just talking.
Robert Miller stated that Randy Romberg was trying his best to kiss Jody. Jody was resisting. Romberg took Jody to the bed and started to take her clothes off. She's screaming and crying and saying, "Please don't do this." At that point, Schaefer and Otterbeck came over.
From Miller's point of view, he was highly intoxicated. He was laying down across the room from the bed. And what he witnessed was a violent assault and rape of Jody by Romberg, Schaefer, and Otterbeck.
Miller insists that he never touched the girl. He was just shocked by what they were doing.
After all three men raped her, she got up and ran for the door.
They were not going to let her escape. Jody was crying, screaming. She said she was going to tell the police. Romberg told her, "This is what's going to happen if you go to the police," and placed his hands around her neck.
She never stopped fighting, but it was this horrid situation.
At some point, she became limp. Mike Schaefer felt her pulse and discovered she was no longer living.
Romberg took her life from her with the assistance of the other two suspects. Then, according to Miller, they had to come up with a way to dispose of her body.
In Robert Miller's statement, he indicated that he did not participate in getting rid of Jody's body, but Randy Romberg, Greg Otterbeck, and Mike Schaefer put her in a refrigerator. Tied a rope around the door of the refrigerator and took the refrigerator and Jody's body up to the lock and dam and dumped the body in the Mississippi River. This was April, so the water levels were high. And there was a great deal of turbulence at that point. And I'm sure that the turbulence of the water broke the rope loose, and eventually Jody's body ended up coming to the surface.
Hearing and understanding the circumstances of her demise in such a horrific way was just devastating. And just unbelievable. Jody was free-spirited, easygoing. I don't know why anyone would want to hurt her.
They were just out having fun. Jody was a girl who liked to go out and have a drink or two and talk to boys. The sadness came in knowing that somebody treated her that way. Nobody deserves to be treated in that manner.
Through the positive identification of Jody Bossman's body and the statements made by Miller of what he saw that night, arrest warrants were drafted for Romberg, Schaefer, and Otterbeck.
As soon as we found out that Jody Bossman was killed in that cabin, right at the top of my head came the Thomasina Donovan case and the close proximity to that cabin where she was found was uncanny. I knew there was a connection. to Thomasina Donovan. I knew that cabin that Jody Bousman was murdered in holds an awful lot of secrets.
On June 1st, 1981, Randy Romberg, Greg Otterbeck, and Mike Schaefer were arrested for the rape and murder of Jody Bousman and charged in Grant County, Wisconsin.
We went to trial and it lasted over a week. The jury returned a verdict of guilty against all three of them on the first-degree murder as well as the sexual assault. The judge sentenced them right then and there, and I remember him saying, "I can't believe what you did to that girl."
To connect the Bousman case with the Donovan case, they needed to look very closely at that cabin on Stump Island. Unfortunately, that cabin burned, and all evidence that might have been there was destroyed. It was never proven what happened or how that fire started. It was suspected as being arson, but unfortunately there wasn't enough evidence to charge anybody in that case.
We worked on the Donovan case for quite a few years, and one of the leads came up with the name of Greg Otterbeck. And Greg Otterbeck was a suspect, a very good suspect. I knew it, but I couldn't prove it. And finally, the case went cold. Many, many years later, in 2009, I received a call from the cold case investigator that had picked up the Thomasina Donovan case. They had taken the clothing of Thomasina and discovered a male DNA on the clothing.
And that DNA profile was definitively determined to be Gregory Otterbeck.
They brought Otterbeck in and from his prison cell, and he admitted to them that he had murdered Thomasina Donovan.
On October 9th of 2009, a hearing was set in Wisconsin, in Grant County, bringing charges against Otterbeck with the death of Thomasina Donovan from 1980.
Gregory Otterbeck was one of the most evil people that I prosecuted. Our facts in the nutshell was that Otterbeck picked up Thomasina Donovan where she was working as a prostitute in East Dubuque.
She may have agreed to go with him somewhere, not necessarily to a cabin on Stump Island, but that was a place that he was familiar with. So it's believed that Otterbeck took Thomasina to Stump Island.
He was going to have sex with her. She changed her mind. She didn't want to have sex and started to scream. He covered her mouth until she stopped breathing.
And eventually, he brought her body back into Wisconsin and dumped it along a rural road in Grant County. A plea agreement was reached, and Otterbeck was sentenced to an additional 20 years on top of the sentence he was already serving.
To find out what actually happened and who did it, you know. Yes, that felt good. But I don't bring her back. Thomasina would probably have her husband and be happily married and everything by now. Life would be good, you know. And I just miss my sister so much, I tell you. We was like that, you know, like two peas in a pot, you know. We was really close, you know. I just wish he was here today.
They were arrested and justice did its job, but I can't go and call my friend and say, hey, how are you doing today? Because she's not there, you know, and that's sad. You just learn to live with it and do your best to remember the good times, and that's what keeps you buoyed.
Her father planted a rose garden out at our arboretum in her honor and her memory. And whenever I went out there, I'd always, you know, say a prayer and just kind of remember the good things that we did together. Her memory is always with me.
St. Joseph Island is a very isolated area. Anything could happen down there and you wouldn't see it or hear it.
There was a cabin in the middle of the bush.
They had no idea that if you go, you probably won't come back.
As I was trying to find the identities of these victims, I became pretty obsessed with this case. The first barrel contained skeletonized remains of an adult female and a young child. The second barrel contained 2 young girls. They just deserve names. They should not be nameless. I was sitting on my couch in my living room as I'm researching. That's when everything clicked. There were a few posts that stood out to me. A young woman that had disappeared, and there was a family member looking for her. I'm contacting her because I know that this is them. This is them. There's no way it's not them. Everything matches. And I'm like, this woman's gonna think I am a complete loon. Well, what can I lose? And within 7 minutes, she responds back, "You've got my heart pounding." And I'm like, oh my God. My hands started like shaking uncontrollably. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. My name is Rebecca Heath, and I am a research librarian during the day. And by night, I like to look into true crime. Up until high school, I would spend a lot of times in the library. I think my personality as it is, I'm just inquisitive and just love to dig into things. I love to find pieces of furniture that someone might think was trash and make it look fancy and new again, make somebody want it again. I had a very traumatic childhood. I craved a family. I craved belonging. These Jane Doe cases I researched are all nameless victims who belong somewhere. Bear Brook was the first case that I started looking into. The year was about 2010. There was a part of me that really truly wanted to believe that I was like a kidnapped kid, that I truly had a family that loved me and wanted me in their lives. And so I started searching missing girl, November 1985. And that is when the story popped up. November 10th, 1985, 3 days before I was born, the first barrel was found in New Hampshire. The first barrel contained skeletonized remains of an adult female and a young child, which they assumed was likely the mother and daughter. The victims had died from blunt force trauma. They had also been dismembered and placed into the barrels. The descriptions of the victims just did not match anyone that was missing. So they did not know who they were at that point. Back in 1985, they had done door-to-door interviews, and each person they asked knew nothing. It was just such a mystery. How did they end up there? "15 years later, the second barrel was found on the same property. The second barrel contained 2 young girls. They were also skeletonized and wrapped in plastic. Now we have 4 victims. They exhumed the 2 victims from the first barrel found back in 1985 and compare the DNA to the second barrel's victims. They found out there was a maternal match between the victims in the first barrel, the adult female and the oldest child, and in the second barrel, the youngest girl, assuming that they were a mother and 2 daughters. The third little girl, who was in the second barrel, had no relation whatsoever to them. They still remained unidentified. We just want to eat? Jane Doe cases specifically do resonate with me because I do see a version of myself in these Jane Does. I was raised in a religious cult, in a home that was not very loving. My environment at home, it was so toxic. So many people were just so miserable. I remember even as a kid just wondering, like, what is it like to be loved? Like, what is it like to be happy? I needed some way out. And they're like, well, you need to make a choice. It's us or the world. I was like, well, okay, I choose the world. As I was leaving, I remember trembling, being scared, because I didn't know anyone. And there's so many times I just wonder, like, how did I not somehow come down the path of somebody that was just so evil and could make me disappear and no one would come looking for me? I think that's kind of really what drives me. I became pretty obsessed with this case. It was hard for me to let it go. I started making it my mission to try and find a little clue that could help tie this case together and give these victims back their names. If I am in an obsessive mood, there's something that just won't let me stop. I could easily spend at least 6 hours outside of work a day, and then weekends, as soon as I wake up till I go to bed, I could just constantly I just gotta keep going. It's like one step closer, one step closer. I generally search the Doe Network, and I also like to use NamUs, which is a website that compiles unidentified individuals, and I just try and put myself in the perspective of a family member and see if I can find any people that are looking for their loved ones. If I was looking to find a loved one in approximately late 70s, 80s, where would I go? So I started going into newspaper archives through classified ads. People a lot of times would post looking for family members there. I also thought about what if they started looking for them right when the internet started? Where would they start looking? So Ancestry has a message board where you could look for missing loved ones. I would use keywords to search sister, daughter, and I start compiling potential matches. And if I found out that they are alive, then they'd be ruled out. So on Facebook, there was a group that followed the case. So if somebody posted something and someone posed a question You know, we might interact with each other in the comments section of the post. People would comment about the case and say, why is nobody looking for them? Like, how could you just let someone go? And to me, it wasn't that there wasn't anyone looking. It was, how do we find those people that are looking for them? And that's how I got in touch with Rhonda and Scott.
I grew up in southern New Hampshire, about 45 minutes from Allenstown. In 2011, I came to this case, and it said that a woman and 3 little girls were found out here in a barrel in the woods in Allenstown. That really bothered me, that not only had someone killed them, but that somebody had actually robbed them of their names as well, and that they'd gone unidentified. Why wasn't there a huge outcry in New Hampshire, in New England, about their disappearance? And so I decided, I think I want to go down and see the area where they were found. I asked my siblings if any of them would go with me.
Early on in the case, that was kind of hard for me to understand, how can what we thought was a mother and her 3 kids go missing and no one seems to be looking for the suspect.
I wanted to lay eyes on the property where they were found just to kind of get some own answers for myself.
It felt like a puzzle, and you've got all of these pieces. Just put them together. Like I don't know, it just seemed like such a solvable case. I feel like they are me. They just deserve names. They should not be nameless. They need someone to fight for them, and I'm willing to do that. I am on my way to meet up with Rhonda and Scott. It's been about 3 years since we last got together. I think one main purpose was that in these Facebook groups, we truly cared about the victims, and if we could all come together and find some answers, that's really what mattered the most.
Interesting meeting Rebecca. She really does know herself. She's know the case, and she's a great researcher. Both Rhonda and I grew up 10 miles outside of Manchester, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But we moved out of the area 2 years ago, so I probably haven't been back for 2 years.
I think it was last fall was the last time I went up to the park and to the property. Follow up on loose ends. It's like a never-ending project for Scott and I. I had been doing a lot of adoption searches for people. I like research. I'm kind of a history buff. In 2011, my kids grew up and left home, and I think it was a little bit of an empty nest moment where I just wanted to find something to research that was a little bit different than I'd been doing for years. And I came to this case, and there were 4 victims put in barrels out here in the woods. I couldn't believe that could be true.
It was an extensive amount of work that Scott and Rhonda put into trying to identify who the perpetrator was and how he was connected to the case. They had the same push and drive that I did. My mission was to try and find the identities of these victims. Rhonda and Scott, they had been just trying to go head first and find a suspect for the murders.
Right in this area here is where the first barrel was found in 1985.
It was found by a couple hunters, brothers who were out here. And at that time, you could look over into the mobile home park and you could see the various mobile homes. You could see the path where people walked their dogs.
We figured that everybody in the neighborhood had been spoken to. Questions been asked.
Many, many, many people told us they waited for the police to come and ask questions, and nobody ever did. Very shortly after they were found, the investigation was taken out of the hands of the local police and turned over to the New Hampshire State Police. And in a lot of people's minds, that's where the investigation fell apart. So finally we just said, all right, we're just a brother and sister. We grew up in New Hampshire and, we believe this case can be solved. We know it can, and we just need to ask the right questions to find out. Two things became very apparent. Nobody knew the little girls were found, almost nobody in the mobile home park. And you can just throw a rock over there practically. And the second thing was that we needed to focus on this property and the men who lived here, because why would you risk coming down here, down a private driveway, in sight of a mobile home park, dumping bodies? Likely, this person who placed them here was familiar with the property. We heard all kinds of stories, like there was a family with kids, they moved away. We'd be like, who are they? And they didn't even know. So then we began thinking, well, maybe they could have lived here. One theory being that whoever did this was what they call a family annihilator. An individual who just exploded one day, killed his family, took off for parts unknown. Maybe a family in the mobile home park befriended the girls if they had stayed on the property.
One of the biggest things we did was to recreate the trailer park, try to identify all the residents that lived there and contact them.
Out of the 10 families that lived there in 1985 that also lived there in 2000, only one family knew that the little girls had been found, and clearly they didn't talk to their neighbors about it. None of the other families, we felt like we're having to prove, pull out the composites and show them.
I know at some point people began wondering if there was a serial killer that was loose.
To go after the suspect every weekend, every evening, we're traveling all over New England talking to people. It was all consuming. I always kept coming back to one thing. They're somebody. They belong to somebody, and somebody is missing them. They had families, and we'd like to see justice served for them.
It took quite a while just going door to door. We come back over and over again sometimes, or people just refused to speak to us, so we just said, we realize us showing up at your door on Saturday morning is awkward, but so are dead little girls. And we just wouldn't take no for an answer.
Use the right two lanes to keep right to Elm Street, downtown, the Milliard.
Rhonda and Scott had a blog going a couple of years before I started proactively searching for answers. But in the beginning, I was alone. I had nobody at all. My research process is just kind of like scattered all over the place. I'm dyslexic, and for the longest time, I couldn't do normal things that everyone else could the same way everyone else could, and I couldn't learn the same way, and it used to frustrate me so much. But it really, truly taught me to think outside the box. There was one specific post that was posted on Ancestry, and it was from 1999. It was family members looking for Sarah McWaters, a child born in 1977 in California. She was missing with her mother, Marlise. Sarah had a half-sister, Marie Vaughn, who was also missing. So as I'm looking into it, the dates are all lining up. The equation already is lining up of the victims found in the barrels. There's 2 girls and there's an adult female. But the more I looked into that case, I really couldn't find enough information to confirm or to rule it out. All I can think of is how do I find who you are? Where else can I look? What angle am I not looking at? There's got to be someone out there that's looking. It just absolutely has to be.
We wanted to find out who lived in the mobile home park. We got aerial photos from late 70s.
And we just started piecing together who lived where. Then I made a Facebook page and a blog.
I had come across the blog before. I know I would reference the list of names of people that lived there.
And during this time, we were having some conversations with a property owner. I think Rhonda asked him, well, do you have any idea who could have done this? And he says, well, I have somebody that I wondered about, but I don't want to say anything bad about him.
And that sent us down.
This was 3 years after having many conversations with him where he said he didn't know anything.
He's the guy that would know everything.
Yep, yep.
Rhonda was on the phone with him, and she was asking about a particular group of people, and he got frustrated and said, no, you're barking up the wrong tree. The person you want to look at is Bobby Evans. And we said, why? And he said, well, he was a strange guy, and he dumped trash on my property.
And that's when you pretty much moved into the Manchester Library.
So we looked up everything we could find, about a Bob Evans.
We heard he was an electrician. Then we began to ask people, do you recall an electrician being in the area named Bob Evans? What was your interest, what was your interaction with him? And we did find people who knew him. This clearing area over here is where the Bear Brook store was. Bob Evans was an electrician, so he helped work on the store in the cooling and refrigeration part of it. One family's recollection is that he was living with a family here on the property in a pop-up camper, and it was around Christmas time, and the family felt bad that there were kids here, and they sent over some of their adult children with food for the family. What we don't know is whether these little girls were the victims. They're sure it was Evans because they knew him. They worked with him at the Wambeck Mill. So we know that he was on this property for some time anyway. We just tried to collect stories in case there was any clue, but we could never find him, So after 6 months of looking into it ourselves, we turned it over to the New Hampshire State Police.
They probably just thought, oh, it's another name that Ron and Scott are giving us. That name didn't mean anything to anyone. It kind of went cold for us, but that name was always in the back of our head.
My name is Jeff Strelzen. I'm a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office.
There was going to be a press release because, there's a big break in the case. I'm at my desk at work. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to see this press release. So I get my phone and my headphones, listening in. I'm like, okay, well, what's the break? What's the break? What's the break?
We believe we have our killer of the Allenstown victims. We're confident that Bob Evans is the person who killed the 4 victims in Allenstown.
The New Hampshire State Police said that the name Bob Evans first came up in 2014 in our research. It was pretty exciting.
At that time, I didn't know Rhonda and Scott had researched Bob Evans. He had a beard and a plaid shirt and these piercing blue eyes. It really kind of came as a shock. He had many other victims besides just the victims that were in the barrels. When New Hampshire State Police had confirmed Bob Evans as the Bear Brook killer, he had already been incarcerated for an unrelated murder in California. They uncovered that he had also kidnapped a baby girl from New Hampshire in 1981, and he had abandoned her in California. Even though this baby girl was not one of the victims in the Bear Brook barrels, she had disappeared not too far from Allenstown, where Bear Brook State Park is located. Once they had the connection of this perpetrator, Bob Evans, in the area of the Bear Brook murders, police tried testing the DNA of this perpetrator, Bob Evans, against the DNA of the victims found in the barrels. The DNA test showed Bob Evans as the biological father of the middle child.
We believe that Bob Evans' killing finally came to an end in California in 2002 with his last victim, Yoon Sun Jun. He certainly fits the profile of a serial killer.
Ms. June had been murdered, dismembered, and was buried in the basement of her residence.
Which I find so shocking. Bob Evans was caught and put in prison in California for his last murder, 17 years after the first Bear Brook victims were discovered.
Evans was eventually charged with murder. He pled guilty in 2003, and in 2010, he died in prison of natural causes.
By the time New Hampshire State Police determined that Evans was the Bear Brook killer, he had been deceased for 6 years. DNA saved from his autopsy confirmed he was father of one of the victims. What stuck with me the most from the press release was that the victim, the little girl that no one seemed to be related to, was Bob Evans' daughter. some reason, I envisioned her with like little pigtails and holding her dad's hand and walking through the woods. And she was like 3 years old. She was like such a tiny little innocent baby. Like, what the hell? She had no idea that when she was in a car ride with him driving up here, that was gonna be the last location she ever visited. Now we have a suspect named, and the victims are still unidentified. When in general, you have the victims identified, and then that's how you find the suspect. It was the opposite in this case. This just opened a whole plethora of opportunities. With this information, I can start tracking his locations, searching for the identities of the victims. And at that point, I assumed that the adult female with her 2 children could have been living in the same property with Bob Evans and Evans' daughter. So they don't really know a lot about Bob Evans' locations. Knew he had one specific address that links to him. That's the known address. No one else is listed with him, although he claimed to have a wife that resided at that residence as well. $925 right in the back. The girls would have lived there too. The neighbors that used to live there within those years did not recognize his photo at all. We'd imagine someone would remember 3 little girls.
Rhonda, Scott, and I came here to visit Bob Evans' office. He was hired to work here to manage the team that essentially broke the factory down. They would fill oil drums or barrels and dump them. And one of the places that they would dump them was at Bear Brook State Park, where the barrels were found. Logically, they were here at some point in this town. So when I come here, it's hard not to feel like you're reliving the moment when the girls were here. Unfortunately, even contacting neighbors in the surrounding areas, employees that worked at Wambach when he worked there, nobody seems to know anything about his life. When working at Wambach Mills, there was one room that he left locked all the time. It wouldn't allow anyone to go into. What was in that room? Could he have been holding the barrels there? Found myself questioning what other angle can you possibly look at? Disappointment once again. These little girls and their mother were just nameless. I have not seen my family in a number of years. Once you leave one of these religious communities, like I was raised in, you're just ostracized. Each person told me, if I leave, you're gonna die, you're going to hell, you're never gonna make it. I guess, if anything, it made me push and dig even further. I had been looking for the victims. About 7 months, then there's an update in the case.
The man known in New Hampshire as Bob Evans, that man's real name was Terry Rasmussen.
Now, the suspect, who they believe to be Bob Evans, is actually just an alias. His true name is Terry Peter Rasmussen.
Law enforcement used DNA from his autopsy and was able to build a family tree and figure out who he was and confirmed it with DNA from his son. The identification of Terry Rasmussen was the first time a killer had been identified using genetic genealogy.
So now with this information, I know his true identity. There's so many things attached to your actual birth name within public records. Terry Rasmussen, that's not a common name. So you don't get as many hits as you do when you're searching for Bob Evans, because let me tell you, that's an endless search. So at least it was narrowed down quite a bit more. Terry Rasmussen actually was previously married, and he had 4 living children, which really poses the question, was he leading 2 lives? He's got this biological daughter that we've assumed he killed and placed in a barrel. I started searching anything relating to Rasmussen that might lead to the identity of the victims. It had been a year since the press release. There was a podcast coming out that was going to focus on the Bear Brook murders.
This is Bear Brook. I'm Jason Moon.
I immediately started listening to it, trying to just grasp any more additional information that perhaps I didn't know about the case at this point. This story grabbed the attention of more people. It showed the magnitude that this case really is. When I was listening to the 3rd or 4th episode, that's when everything clicked.
The release of the isotope testing results was, in some ways, the final Hail Mary in the Bear Brook case.
This specific episode focused on isotope testing that was conducted on the victims.
Living things carry an imprint of their environment recorded in isotopes.
It's like your body is coding everything that you've ingested over time.
Radioisotope testing in the bones, teeth, and hair of the victims can offer one of the first real clues about where the Bear Brook victims came from.
But they did tell with the adult female that she was possibly from California or surrounding states.
The map for the related victims includes parts of the West Coast.
As soon as I heard that, I remembered that one specific post on Ancestry message board. That Ancestry post from 1999 with Sarah McWater's family looking for her. A child born in 1977 who disappeared in California. And I'm like, pause the podcast, rewind it back, and I listened to it over again.
Parts of the West Coast.
And as I'm listening, I'm like, I don't know. I really think that could be them. Sarah McWaters could be one of the victims. She could have been one of the 2 daughters that were related to the adult female. I'm going to contact that woman who posted in 1999. I'm contacting her because I know that this is them. This is them. There's no way it's not them. Everything matches. There's just no way. And I'm like, all right, how am I going to contact her? Like, that's probably a broken email address. That's from 1999. I'm gonna find her on Facebook. So I'm like looking through and I find the person's name. I'm like, all right. Hey, just wondering, are you the same person that posted an Ancestry message board post from 1999 looking for Sarah McWaters? And I'm like, this woman's gonna think I am a complete loon. Well, what can I lose? And say within 7 minutes, she responds back, yeah, it is, it's me. You've got my heart pounding. Oh, okay, I'm just wondering if I could help you find her. Then she starts just giving me like little tidbits on Marlies. Marlies had 2 daughters, Sarah McWaters and Marie Vaughn. And she goes, oh yeah, and by the way, we believe that she ran off with a guy and his name was Rasmussen. And I'm like, oh my God. My hands started like shaking uncontrollably. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I'm like trying to type, like, oh my God. I'm like, it's really them, it's really them, it's them, it's them, it's them. It was so shocking. I could not believe that I found out the identification of the victims. And now I'm trying to process, like, oh my God, they're gonna be identified. They're gonna be identified. It's them. So the next day, I contacted Detective Headley in California. I'm like, I think I have a credible tip. There's two girls, Sarah McWaters and Marie Vaughn. There were half-sisters missing with their mother, Marlise Honeychurch, in California. Like, I'm sure you get this all the time, but I really, 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 really believe that this is the victims of the Bear Brook murders. Marlise Honeychurch disappeared with a guy with the last name Rasmussen. And they're like, so what's your relation to this case? Just a hobby. I look into these cases. And I think he was a little skeptical at first, but then slowly warmed up to the idea that a member of the public could offer a tip. The next day, Sarah McWater's family was up in New Hampshire getting their DNA test against the victims. After the family members had their DNA tested, we waited and waited and waited for what seemed like forever.
Hans, come on. Come.
Marlise's family had mixed feelings. They believed that it likely was her and that it was the children, but at the same time, they were still hoping it wasn't her. They were hoping that, you know, she had just moved on and was living a fulfilled life.
When I heard that she found the family, of course, Scott and I were dying to know, you know, what she had learned, but I didn't want to just be obnoxious, and I knew that maybe she wouldn't want to say anything publicly until she found out more, so it was just kind of a waiting game on our end, too.
7 months later, there was a press release identifying 3 of the victims.
After a lot of hard work by many people, we've identified 3 of the Allenstown murder victims. The mother has been identified as Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch. This is Marlise's oldest daughter, Marie Elizabeth Vaughn. This is Sarah Lynn McWaters, the youngest murder victim.
You know, you started to learn a little bit about these people that you've been trying to identify for all those years, and now they had faces, they had names, they had families, and that's when I think there was a lot of sadness at that point. They had kind of become our family because nobody else was advocating for them, and you know, it kind of took them on as, I guess, as our family, and I didn't realize that till afterwards. Unfortunately, there's always going to be questions that we will never get answers to, and I think that's always going to haunt us. I know there was years that nobody knows where he was, and most likely there are more victims.
Did you go to the funeral?
Yes, Rhonda and I went to the funeral, and we got a chance to meet Marlise's siblings.
We as a family would like to thank the community. Although this moment is bittersweet, they have their names back on this day. They can rest in peace.
I believe it's just a matter of time before Rasmussen's biological daughter is fully identified.
There is also a picture of a birthday party that Rasmussen's daughter may have attended. If the right person saw the picture and came forward, then perhaps she could get identified. Really, it's an appeal to the public. If her composite looks familiar, or if the circumstances of her life seem familiar, it would be really helpful if the public could submit tips about who she might be.
The case kind of solidifies for me that I truly made right decisions when I left the community I was raised in, because I felt that I was meant to do more in life. And as I was trying to find the identities of these victims and these girls, I truly found my own identity. And that was something that was just so unexpected. I am still working on this case. The last middle child is still unidentified, and I cannot let her go.
Are you okay? This part was like getting really mad that she's not identified. I thought by the next time I'd come back, she'd be identified. This doesn't feel fair to her.
She deserves her own name. She deserves to have her own identity rather than the daughter of a serial killer. And I will continue that search until they find out who she is.
So then we began thinking, well, maybe they could have lived here. One theory being that whoever did this was what they call a family annihilator. You know, an individual who just exploded one day, killed his family, took off for parts unknown. Maybe a family in the mobile home park befriended the girls if they had stayed on the property.
One of the biggest things we did was to recreate the trailer park, try to identify.
Sometimes I wanna give it all up, but I can't do it, bro. When love has grown, breaking up is a painful thing. Do you know when that falls? I feel so lonely and empty. I listen to each of my own words. I heard every writhing pain, torn apart in painful nostalgia. What love is filling me. And I will never forget it forever. Then this heart has to fight again, so both had to suffer. Hello, now I know what to do when nostalgia always overflows. I wanna scream and let the whole world know that I'm in love. A love that goes again.
It was family members looking for Sarah McWaters, a child born in 1977 in California. She was missing with her mother, Marlise. Sarah had a half-sister, Marie Vaughn, who was also missing. So as I'm looking into it, the dates are all lining up. The equation already is lining up of the victims found in the barrels. There's 2 girls and there's an adult female. But the more I looked into that case, I really couldn't find enough information to confirm or to rule it out. All I can think of is like, how do I find who you are? Where else can I look? What angle am I not looking at? There's gotta be someone out there that's looking. It just absolutely has to be.
We wanted to find out who lived in the mobile home park. We got aerial photos from late 70s.
And we just started piecing together who lived where. Then I made a Facebook page and a blog.
I had come across the blog before. I know I would reference the list of names of people that lived there.
And during this time, we were having some conversations with a property owner. I think Rhonda asked him, well, do you have any idea who could have done this? And he says, well, I have somebody that I wondered about, but I don't want to say anything bad about him.
And that sent us down.
3 years after having many conversations with him where he said he didn't know anything.
He's the guy that would know everything.
Yep.
Rhonda was on the phone with him, and she was asking about a particular group of people, and he got frustrated and said, no, you're barking up the wrong tree. The person you want to look at is Bobby Evans. And we said, why? And he said, well, he was a strange guy, and he dumped trash on my property.
And that's when you pretty much moved into the Manchester Library.
So we looked up everything we could find, about a Bob Evans.
We heard he was an electrician. Then we began to ask people, do you recall an electrician being in the area named Bob Evans? What was your interest, what was your interaction with him? And we did find people who knew him. This clearing area over here is where the Bear Brook store was. Bob Evans was an electrician, so he helped work on the store in the cooling and refrigeration part of it. One family's recollection is that he was living with a family here on the property in a pop-up camper, and it was around Christmas time, and the family felt bad that there were kids here, and they sent over some of their adult children with food for the family. What we don't know is whether these little girls were the victims. They're sure it was Evans because they knew him. They worked with him at the Wambeck Mill. So we know that he was on this property for some time anyway. We just tried to collect stories in case there was any clue, but we could never find him, So after 6 months of looking into it ourselves, we turned it over to the New Hampshire State Police.
They probably just thought, oh, it's another name that Ron and Scott are giving us. That name didn't mean anything to anyone. It kind of went cold for us, but that name was always in the back of our head.
My name is Jeff Strelzen. I'm a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the New Hampshire Attorney General's Office.
There was going to be a press release because, there's a big break in the case. I'm at my desk at work. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to see this press release. So I get my phone and my headphones, listening in. I'm like, okay, well, what's the break? What's the break? What's the break?
We believe we have our killer of the Allenstown victims. We're confident that Bob Evans is the person who killed the 4 victims in Allenstown.
The New Hampshire State Police have said that the name Bob Evans first came up in 2014 in our research. It was pretty exciting.
At that time, I didn't know Rhonda and Scott had researched Bob Evans. He had a beard and a plaid shirt and these piercing blue eyes. It really kind of came as a shock. He had many other victims besides just the victims that were in the barrels. When New Hampshire State Police had confirmed Bob Evans as the Bear Brook killer, he had already been incarcerated for an unrelated murder in California. They uncovered that he had also kidnapped a baby girl from New Hampshire in 1981, and he had abandoned her in California. Even though this baby girl was not one of the victims in the Bear Brook barrels, she had disappeared not too far from Allenstown, where Bear Brook State Park is located. Once they had the connection of this perpetrator, Bob Evans, in the area of the Bear Brook murders, police tried testing the DNA of this perpetrator, Bob Evans, against the DNA of the victims found in the barrels. The DNA test showed Bob Evans as the biological father of the middle child.
If guys that are in this business tell you that they don't carry it home with them, that's bullshit. This job can break you if you let it. The man I was then and the man I am now are 2 different people. That case became an obsession to me. The damn toughest case I had for so many reasons. The violence, the death, it wears on the soul. The Marlon Gidd case would not go away. It was with me constantly. So you want to talk about Carol Marlon and Maggie Ginn? I was working midnight shift. I'd gotten Officer of the Year. I think I was at a point in my career that I couldn't be beaten. I had a huge ego. Got absorbed in my work, and I let my work control me.
Okay. What's up, Tuttle? Got a call from this guy reported his wife missing. Been about 4 hours since he's seen her. 4 hours? Waste my time with 4 hours for. Husband says she received a threatening letter at work, gives him cause for concern. Where's she work? Astor and Leeds. Defense contractor? Yeah, they both work there. Says she went out with a friend after work, didn't come home. All right. Probably be home by the time I get there.
I didn't mind working midnight shift. It could wear on you, but nothing was better from a detective standpoint than having something to work on.
Mr. Peake, we don't usually follow up on missing persons reports after only 4 hours. My wife said she was going to be home at 8:30. Now, I asked her not to go, and she went anyway. Ever since she got that letter, I worry. I was told it was a death threat of some kind. Yeah, it was pretty much a death threat. I read it. Do you have the letter? It was turned into security at Astor and Lee. Were they able to tell who sent it? I could maybe get you a copy tomorrow morning. Yeah, that'd be fine. Good. What's your wife's name? Carol Marlon. Carol Marlon. We'll call me Mom. She was out with her friend Maggie. They used to work together. You know the name of the restaurant? They weren't sure, so no. Maybe I'm overreacting. I know it sounds crazy. You got an address for Maggie? I don't believe I do. She's my wife's friend. I barely know her. Miss Peake, why don't you be honest with me? Anything I need to know about? Any marital problems? Anything like that? Any reason to think your wife might want to leave you? Nothing. We're happy. I mean, I get it. 4 hours. But this is really not like her. Try calling her friend. Maggie Ginn, yeah. No answer. Okay. You got that number for me? Here it is. All right, let me get back to the office, look into it. I'll call you in a bit. Thanks, I appreciate it. Car. I'm sorry, what? What kind of car does your wife have? A Buick Regal, blue. Right. Okay, thank you.
I've seen this kind of thing before in cases. Wife leaves, husband leaves, and they'll stay gone for a few days, sometimes a week, sometimes months. I called the number that Peake had given me for Maggie Ginn twice and went to a recorded message. We checked the hospitals, checked the jails. There was no word.
Ed had patrol look into that blue Buick. Nothing. Nothing. I got the Ginn address. Want me to send a car? Nah, it's okay. I'll go. All right, then, see you later. Hey, Marnie.
Lusso? You know he can't keep his mouth shut.
Trust me, I know.
How's your neck?
It's quiet. You?
Hot. Boring.
Tell me about it.
Listen, I'm wiped. Wanna see my place?
I gotta finish this missing persons first.
I'm not sure Marnie knew what she was getting into. Maybe not so much about the job, but, about me and the way that I, the intensity that I had with the job. At around 7 in the morning, I got the address for Maggie from security where she worked. I remember, to this moment, turning onto the street, and there was Carol Marlin's car. Down in my gut, I said, this is not good. We had a problem. I knew whatever it was bad. Missing person case just turned into a double homicide. In my career, I've dealt with a lot of death. When you actually are the first on the scene, you never, ever get used to that.
Sorry. What do we got? Didn't have time to go home. Double homicide. No weapons I could find, no forced entry. We know who the Vicks are yet? Yeah. Pretty sure Carol Marlin. Husband called them missing persons. She got the worst of it. The other one's Maggie again, homeowner. Why don't you go ahead and lock off the perimeter? Canvass the area, see if anybody's heard or seen anything. And step inside with me.
It's kind of chilling to think about it right now, but I remember standing in there thinking they were comfortable with whoever did this. Both of them were, because they were ambushed. Whoever did this knew one or knew both of them.
Eddie? Yeah. heck's Barry Webb? I don't know.
There's a reason that Carol Marlin was beaten in the head and the face like she was. There's a reason that there's no forced entry. It doesn't really look like it was a struggle. And there's a reason that there's a piece of paper in Maggie Ginn's hand.
That's my wife's car, all right? Is my wife in there? That's just, okay, I'm okay. Yeah, just tell me what's going on. Can you tell me?
Some people are good at being emotional, but I remember with Peak, I wasn't having a good feeling about it.
Mr. Peak, I'm gonna ask you a few questions. You up for that? How were they killed? We're still determining that. Can you think of anybody that want to hurt your wife?
I don't know. There's this guy at work. Carol and I both work with him. He's got issues with me.
What guy?
Barry Webb. He thought I was having an affair with this woman we both know, Linda Mills.
Were you?
No, we're just friends. Barry's the one in love with her. He thought I was coming between them.
Why would you think that?
Well, Linda and I went on a business trip and we had a great time as friends. She told Barry about the trip and suddenly he's acting all weird with me. And then she gets this death threat.
Now, you said that you had no idea who sent the letter, but now you're saying that you think it might be Barry Webb. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't want to accuse the guy. I don't have any proof. He would say things like under his breath.
What kind of things?
Stuff like, he'll never get her.
You happen to get that letter for me?
I don't know yet.
It's okay. I'll get it. Any reason to think that Barry and your wife might have been, you know...
It's crossed my mind. She had an affair a few years back. I forgave her. So yeah, I mean, it's possible.
Okay. All right. Hang tight. You said you had no idea where Maggie Ginn
lived.
Yeah.
I got her address from security at work.
Yeah.
I wanted to help look for Carol.
Okay.
Peluso notified the Ginn family and talked with them, and it was hard. They were very upset. Maggie Ginn, she was a widow, had raised 3 kids, grandkids. Carol Marlin was 46 years old, doted over John, worked hard, was just a beautiful person, totally innocent victims.
Son gave them to me. Said they were best friends, did everything together.
Damn shame.
I'm gonna find the SOB that did this. I mean, we're gonna figure this out.
All right, Meg Ginn's son was robbed. Thought maybe whoever killed his mother might have gotten the address from his lockbox. They robbed about 10 grand in jewelry from him. Could have been a robbery gone wrong.
I doubt it. Look into that.
One neighbor said he saw a very tall, thin man run across his lawn around the same time the murders took place. Said he came down to the curb to get a better view, but the man disappeared through some trees near Maggie's house.
You get a murder weapon?
No.
So we got 2 dead bodies. We got no witnesses, no murder weapon, no prints. Nothing. There's no way somebody kills 2 people and doesn't leave a trace. Come on, I need a murder weapon.
In processing the scene, we didn't find anything missing from Maggie Ginn's house. I searched it twice. We didn't find anything of significance. We've got to retrace the steps, and we've got to concentrate and search to find the murder weapon. We were looking for any instrument, maybe a hammer or something similar that may have been used. Some heavy instrument that could have been held in the hand and used at close range.
Hey, guys, I think I found something. We found the pipe in the woods behind the victim's home. Now, I know that could have caused the type of injuries we found on both our victims.
Well, judging by the size and weight of the pipe, I agree. If there's blood residue or prints, I'll let you know.
I appreciate it.
Both victims suffered significant blunt force trauma, and it appeared that an instrument like a hammer or something similar to a hammer was used to inflict the injuries. I knew that I had to find physical evidence.
Pipe's not our weapon. Nothing ties it to the crime. No blood, prints, no DNA. Pipe's been sitting in the ground for years.
I needed to find that murder weapon. I had to regroup. And we're back to square one.
Yeah, Barry Webb, please. He's not in?
Barry Webb's name is on the invoice at the crime scene. We got Pete talking about him.
No, I'll call back. Thank you.
And then I'm not able to get in touch with him. So when I talked to coworkers about Pete and Barry Webb, a couple of them told me that Pete had described how Webb was abusive. Pete was afraid of him.
You buying that break and entering story Webb selling? You buying Pete's story?
At this point, I ain't buying anything from anybody till I get some hard evidence.
Like a weapon?
Yep, that'd be nice. You get that threat note we asked for?
We're still looking.
Who the heck's Barry Webb?
Pluzo. That's the same invoice as in Meg against hand. Thank you. 09.
Linda Mills, she was stuck in the middle of it.
Detective Herman?
Yeah.
I'm Linda Mills. I wanted to talk to you about Barry Webb.
This is something straight out of a damn movie.
Look, Barry would never hurt anyone.
You and Barry close?
Yes, but we're just friends.
How did Barry feel about John Peake?
I suspect he hated John. Look, I turned John down a number of times. He kept hitting on me. His wife, Carol, hated me because she thought that John and I were a thing, and...
Were you?
Absolutely not.
Just be honest with yourself. Is Barry in love with you? I'll take that as a yes.
Barry would never be capable of murder. Look, he was just trying to get John to leave me alone.
She was definitely trying to help Barry Webb.
Barry Webb?
Yeah, that's me.
Detective Herman. You mind if I ask you a few questions? You know Carol, Marlon, and Meg again?
Yeah, I know them both. Why?
Hey, he was nervous. He was nervous.
Listen, can we talk?
Are you here about the break-in I had the other night?
I didn't have any idea what he was talking about. So Webb came into the office, and we sat down, and I talked with him.
Mr. Webb. Identify that for me?
Sure, it looks like a piece of a receiving memo.
That your signature right there?
No. I mean, it is, but that's not my handwriting.
Look, Mr. Webb, we looked into you. We know you have issues with John Peake. Listen to me. Listen to me. Don't lie.
Yeah, fine. I have issues with the guy. But Peake is the one with the problem.
You two have Linda Mills in common?
Linda and I are friends. In fact, he's been all over her, but she isn't interested. I know he blames me for it.
Mr. Webb, you have to understand that what we're dealing with is a double homicide. You understand that?
I'm not lying.
All right. We need you to submit a hair sample for us. Will that be okay?
Why? I didn't do anything. Look, okay, when you first came to me, I told you I thought you were there for a break and enter that I reported.
Right.
It was John Peake who broke into my house.
How does John Peake forget to tell the police about this happening out there at Webb's house?
I went to the basement and I saw him try to leave through the window with this black bag. I went to grab him, but he got away.
Black bag.
Well, he must have stolen something from me because it was making a clanking sound like metal on metal. Look, I'm not taking the blame for murder.
Right here. How far is it from John Peake's house to Maggie Ginn's house?
About 10 miles?
10 miles. And he'd have to drive over this bridge to get there now, wouldn't he?
The way to get there's over this bridge.
It's a good place to hide a murder weapon, isn't it?
Old black bag.
Why wasn't the letter reported to the police?
Carol didn't make a big deal about it. In fact, she blew it off, actually.
Blew it off. She wasn't worried about it?
No.
Any idea who or why someone would threaten Carol Marlowe?
Well, we've had a bunch of layoffs. Could have been some pissed off employee.
You ever have any complaints about John Peake?
John Peake mentioned that Barry Webb had it out for him when he brought me the letter.
Give me a second. John Peake brought you the letter?
Yeah.
I thought Carol Marlin reported it.
No, it was John Peake, and he made a big stink about it.
Any reason to think John Peake has issues with his wife? You know, maybe he was cheating on her, or...
Man, all kinds of shenanigans go on around here. I couldn't see either way.
Can I keep this?
Sure.
Thanks, sir.
Too many things with Peake didn't add up. He lied about knowing where Maggie Ginn lived. He lied about the threatening letter. And he didn't tell me about the break-in at Barry Webb's house. I needed something significant to tie Peake to the crime, and then I found it.
John Peake changed his life insurance 2 weeks before his wife was killed.
They both did. She changed hers as well, same day. That's good.
Peake's our guy.
He was going to plant evidence in Webb's basement. He was going to plant the murder weapon there, thinking the police find this invoice with Webb's name on it. They're going straight out there. They're going to search his place. They're going to find a bloody hammer.
Now I'm going to push for a confession.
Well, Ed, still have a murder weapon.
It's John Peake that did it. With or without the murder weapon, I get a confession. He's going to jail.
Yeah, but Pete gets smart, stops talking. We don't have enough to press charges.
I'll get the confession.
He was a huge gamble because I knew I got one shot.
I think you planted the invoice in Maggie Ginn's hand.
What invoice?
The one with Barry Webb's signature on it. I think you wrote it, and I think you shoved it into Maggie Ginn's hand right after you killed her.
What? No, I didn't kill her.
I think you lied about the threat letter.
No, I forgot that I was the one who brought it in.
And you failed to tell me you showed up at Barry Webb's house the night your wife was murdered.
Barry had it out for me. I went to his house because I was worried for my wife.
You got an answer for everything, don't you, John? Why don't you just tell me the truth?
I didn't kill her, if that's what you're asking. I loved my wife.
Yeah, well, maybe she didn't love you.
Don't you say that. Don't you dare say that!
Weren't you the beneficiary on your wife's life insurance?
Yeah, and she was on mine.
Didn't you change that life insurance policy 2 weeks before she was killed?
People change their life insurance policies.
Oh, so it was just good timing then. You want me to tell you what I think happened? You wanted Carol Marlin gone because you had eyes for Linda Mills. I mean, she looked good. The girl looked good, right? And I get it. Time for a change. You wanted to frame Barry Webb, get him out of the picture, but you weren't expecting him to be home that night. What was in the black bag, John? Oh, was that the murder weapon?
Everyone suspects the husband.
It's okay, John.
I was scared. She.
You might be in charge.
I'm thinking about it.
Knowing it and proving it are two different things, detective. You should be ashamed of yourself.
In Georgia, the best way to get a conviction is physical evidence and a confession. In this case, it was circumstantial evidence. I mean, there were all these circumstances, and what was going to put us over that wall was him admitting to it, and he didn't do it. I felt like I'd failed on the case.
Let's dredge a lake.
Only makes sense. Pete tossed the murder weapon in the drink.
We don't have the manpower. By the time we dredge the lake, which is impossible, by the way, Pete will die of old age.
Without a murder weapon.
We got nothing. Yeah, I'm aware.
Eddie.
Go for Eddie.
Just got a call from John Peake's father.
He wants to confess. And?
Father says his son's missing. Says Peake left a suicide note.
I'd had my fill when he wrote this letter and disappeared. And thinking, that son of a bitch. And it was just like I was numb for a few minutes.
We'll talk to him. I want to see that note.
If he went off, killed himself, case is closed. I want to see the note because it didn't fit what I knew about John Peake, that he was actually going to go out and kill himself. To me, this was all self-serving, cry on somebody's shoulder BS. I knew he was going to surface, just a matter of when.
Peake's trying to hide the evidence. No way he's committed suicide.
One of the things that I remember thinking about is, what if he's returned to where he ditched that bag? What if it's not in the water? What if it wasn't thrown in a dumpster?
Peake is right here. Maggie Ginn and Barry Webb was right there. Peake was breaking into Barry Webb's house when he got caught with the black bag.
I think he got rid of it between the drive from Webb's house to home. Because he knows now, hey, the gig's up, he caught me in the basement, law enforcement's gonna be involved out there. I gotta do something with it. So maybe he hid it in a temporary place.
We find Peake, we find a murder weapon.
We spent the next 48 hours trying to find John Peake. We didn't have any luck. Around that time, we got the lab results on Barry Webb's hair samples, and he was cleared.
Eddie, some lawyer here to see you? You can call off your search. My client, John Peake, as you can see, is alive and well. Any further questions for Mr. Peake can go through me.
Oh, I'm glad Mr. Peake's alive and well. Wish I could say the same for his wife and Maggie Ginn.
We got nothing.
So we keep digging.
I screwed up. We're never gonna find that murder weapon, man. It's gone. Because of me, that guy's gonna get away with murder.
It was a burden. I mean, it was a huge problem to me. When it looked like we weren't going to come up with anything else, the anger toward him and what he had done, it was worse. I wanted to provoke a confrontation.
Hey, John. John! Hey, why don't we use some of that insurance money of Carol's? Put out a reward. Catch this son of a bitch, huh? Huh, John? John, you know where to find me!
Maggie's family and Carol Marlin's family, and they're frustrated. But in defense of them, I mean, they had a right to be, I think, and you know, because hey, you're the detective. You think he's the killer? He's still walking the street. When I found out Pete got remarried, I can remember thinking, well, that SOB. Okay, what a arrogant, condescending piece of crap. What is he thinking? Is he thinking, I got away with it once, I'm gonna get away with it again?
Slowly.
What are you doing? Okay.
You ready?
Yes, I'm
Didn't
ready.
peek?
No, I didn't peek.
Surprise!
Oh, thank you, baby. Oh, look at all. Oh, thank you.
Come on, here we go.
came home and there she was, I swear. I found her like that. I know everyone thinks the husband did it, but I didn't do anything.
I remember I was sick to my stomach when I first heard that he had killed again. I mean, literally sick to my stomach. He is a master manipulator. He's set this thing in motion, but I am flabbergasted. I mean, I am dumbfounded that he has done this again. Done it again in the same county, knowing he's going to have to deal with the same people again. Meaning me. I just caved to the fact that he's a sociopathic killer, and we got to deal with it.
Son of a bitch says new wife, Casey Peak, dead when he got home.
How convenient. Carol and Maggie are both beaten.
Yeah, with hammers or something. Casey was killed with a shotgun, right to the back of the head.
She never saw it coming either.
You have physical evidence, you have circumstantial evidence, and then also when you have multiple incidents, multiple crimes committed by the same offender, you can use the similarities, the pattern.
All right. We swabbed Peak for gun residue, got nothing.
Of course not. Planned it out.
Just like the first murders, we got no murder weapon.
Peak found Casey dead, he called it in, just like he called in Carol Marlin missing, right?
That's a pattern.
Yeah, but it's not enough to link the two cases together.
All of the circumstances, the dishonesty, the lies, I had charted those.
But we need more.
Peak said his wife's purse was stolen. Then Mr. Myers found it, got Peak's number from it, and called him.
Peak said the phone call worried him so much he went home to check on his wife, and that's where he found her dead, shot in the back of the head.
And now he refuses to take a lie detector test.
I wonder why. We need something to tie it all together, or else the DA won't give us an arrest warrant.
I wanted to charge him, but we're dealing with circumstantial evidence. What I felt was overwhelming circumstantial evidence, but in and of itself, circumstantial evidence. And we didn't have that thing that was going to seal the deal.
Luzo.
Tell me you found something.
That was in the detail.
Got nothing to say till my lawyer gets here.
I hope you have an expensive lawyer.
He was one lucky son of a bitch for a long time. Did he plan it? Was it methodical? To a certain degree, yes. Was it sloppy? Yes. Did he outthink himself? Yes. Did he outthink us? Nope.
Peak took out a life insurance policy on his second wife, Casey Peak.
Seems Carol Marlin.
We got our pattern. Think we can get him on all three murders?
One way to find out.
We had enough similarities that it put me in a position where I had enough probable cause to take a warrant in the Carol Marlin Maggie Ginn case.
John Peak, you're under arrest for the murders of Casey Peak, Carol Marlin, and Maggie Ginn. You want to waive your right, John? We talk about it?
We've already talked, detective.
Okay.
It's tough. You know, we got 3 dead women and you know, we can't change that. So I just wish I could have put him in jail sooner. But it didn't work out. And the worst thing about that is we had another victim, and you know, that bothers me. But in the end, you know, in the end we won. And he's where he needs to be. That's it for me. That's all I got. Unless you have other questions.
I think that anyone who becomes a prosecutor realizes the cases that you care about the most are the ones when the most innocent of us are hurt or murdered. If you can't protect them, then what are you doing? My grandma was 99 when she passed away, and I remember thinking, oh, she's super safe. When she went to her retirement home, nothing can happen to her. You have to feel that way. You need to feel that way. But in 2018, law enforcement officers around Dallas, Texas, happened upon a serial killer that was preying on a world of very vulnerable victims. Everyone assumed since the victims were older, they were dying of natural causes. But these were not natural deaths, it was murder. And the killer was able to take the lives of over 20 people.
Police say they plan to review every single death of an elderly woman in the area where there was no witness.
That morning, I was out running errands, and Scott called me and said he got a call from somebody who said that Mom didn't make it to the Dallas Cowboys watching party, and she wasn't at church.
It's terrifying when you get that call that somebody who's very reliable, who never missed a Cowboy game in the history of the Cowboys, was missing church, missing her friends, missing that Cowboy party, and not answering her phone. You panic. After calling our mother multiple times and her not answering, then it was very obvious there was something wrong. I contacted Rob, and we headed straight to the house.
I was the first one there, unlocked the door, called for her, ran through the living room, and I saw her feet sticking out on the side of the bed. She was really pale. Her arm was across her face. I took her arm across, and her glasses were all messed up. She was unresponsive, dead on her bedroom floor.
I'm just in shock.
2 weeks before, the doctor said, perfect health, you're gonna live another 20 years. What happened?
Your brain's trying to process that this woman that you'd spent Christmas with a week before is laying crumpled on the floor, dead. Rob stepped out to call 911. This flood of people to start rolling in. First responders, the EMTs, then the police show up. The detective had told me they've looked her over. They don't see any signs of a struggle, no bruising. They turned her back. Everything was fine.
We asked the police, hey, we noticed that she was missing her rings on her fingers, her wedding ring and then the ring that my dad got her.
That she never took off. These were fixtures, and they were gone.
And they say old people hide stuff. The police didn't think there was any foul play. It was natural causes.
Our mother was very engaged in church, very supportive of the community. She was a very positive person. She was very optimistic. Things were always going to work out, keep a positive attitude, look to the future, be nice to people. Things tend to work out. That was kind of how she lived her life.
Sweet, sweet lady.
Couldn't have asked for a better woman to raise us, to be there for us through our entire lives.
When you think of the safest, nicest, most well-off part of Dallas County, you think of Plano, Texas. It's where you go when you have everything. So if your mother is retired there, living in a home there, you're going to think she's pretty safe. But in 2018, all that was put into question.
Plano 911, what's the emergency?
We have a neighbor that we cannot awake.
Okay, is she
Yes,
breathing?
she is breathing.
Okay, and how old are they?
She must be almost 90.
Okay.
We can't wake her up.
After the paramedic spoke with Mary Bartell, he felt there was something more to this story, and he wanted an officer to investigate this. I responded to the hospital, spoke with Mary Bartell, introduced myself to her, and asked her if she would tell me in her own words what had happened. At around 8:30 in the morning, she walks to her front door after hearing constant knocking. As she was going to the door, this suspect pushes his way in. First thing she sees and focuses on is his green gloves. He told her to go to the bed, and she just complied. When she got to the bed, he pushed her down, grabbed one of her pillows from her bed, and put it on top of her face and chest and just pushed down real hard. Mary Bartell thought she was going to die. That's the last she remembers. Mary Bartell states that she was missing jewelry, rings that she had on both of her hands, one of those rings being a wedding ring that she's had for 50 years and never really took it off. My first priority was to get an investigator to Mary Bartell's house. So I contacted another detective, and as she was going to process Mary Bartell's crime scene, she learns there is a suspicious death investigation right across the hall, which is Ann Conklin's residence. So at that point, the Plano Police Department was investigating one death, Ann Conklin, and attempted murder on Mary Bartell to see if they were related or not. We started to do a canvass, looking for any other witnesses, any other video, anything that would give us a lead. We learned that just a few days before, on March 15th, a gentleman by the name of Richard Plink picked up his mother to take her to a doctor's appointment and observed this black male, well-dressed, sitting in his Nissan Altima at Preston Place. And later, he noticed the same person was still in the same parking lot, but at a different parking spot. He just thought it was weird, so he asked him if he could help him with anything. And this man stated that he was fine, that he was just waiting for his next therapy appointment. That's not really unusual because there's older people in that community, but that was not settling to him. So he wrote down the license plate, and when we ran it, we learned the driver of that car was listed as Billy Schmiermeyer. So we started looking at Billy Schmiermeyer a little bit more and learned that he had some prior arrests for criminal trespass at another senior living center in Dallas. Now we know that we need to locate Billy Schmiermeyer. There was this red jewelry box with a name of Lou T. Harris.
With the possibility of more victims on their hands, officers do a welfare check on Lou T. Harris.
4 or 5 cases quickly jumped to almost 10 cases.
An attack on a 90-year-old woman named Mary Bartell leads police to the connection of another case that might be related in another part of Dallas, where a suspect named Billy Schmiermeyer had a prior arrest for a criminal trespass at another senior living facility 2 years earlier.
Edgemere is a senior living facility in Dallas. And in April of 2016, security personnel had noticed that this man had been around and they weren't sure why, and he was given a warning not to return. Then he did return in June.
This man is stating that he was a healthcare worker involved with the location, which ultimately was not true. And Dallas PD identified him as from Billy Schmiermeyer. He had no affiliation with that location and was given a criminal trespass. So we had started looking at Billy Schmiermeyer a little bit more. Billy Schmiermeyer is an individual who came to the United States in the early 2000s from Kenya, who had a visa for a short period of time to be here to work and got into the healthcare business as a caregiver. So we started getting very suspicious that maybe our person of interest in the attack on Mary Bartell and the death of Ann Conklin is Billy Schmiermeyer. We learned from Dallas PD that Billy Schmiermeyer had a warrant out for his arrest for public intoxication out of Dallas. Detective Triviate and I discussed it and said, he's a person of interest. Let's get him in custody, bring him to the Plano Police Department jail, sit down and talk to him and see what we learn. The arrest team set several officers throughout his apartment complex. A person who we believe to be Billy Schmiermeyer drove in around 6 p.m. We had a detective near a dumpster. Billy Schmiermeyer drives to that dumpster and then discarded some items. He was able to see Billy Schmiermeyer get back into his car and drive to his assigned parking space. They went up to him and made the arrest. And when they extracted him out of the vehicle, on his person, Billy Schmiermeyer had some jewelry, bracelets, some $2 bills. As they detained him, they went and looked at the dumpster to find out what did he discard. There was this red jewelry box, and it had miscellaneous items with a name of Lou T. Harris.
With the possibility of more victims on their hands, while Billy Schmiermeyer is being detained, officers do a welfare check on Lou T. Harris, who lives in the Dallas city limits, which borders Plano, Texas.
Upon our arrival, we were told by Dallas PD that Miss Harris was located inside the residence. The residence was secure, and she was found deceased next to her bed. Everything appeared to be natural. We discussed with Dallas PD deployment that we were investigating specifically Mary Bartell, and that the likelihood of the weapon being a pillow, because that's what Mary Bartell described her weapon to be. They went back inside and found a smeared lipstick on Lou T. Harris's pillow. We also informed them that we found a set of keys in the center console of the car that Billy Schmiermeyer was arrested out of. And they confirmed that the keys go to her front door. At that point, they agreed based on what they found and our investigation with Mary Bartell, it was decided that Dallas PD Homicide needed to get involved.
I'm feeling a lot of fear and panic because we've never had police presence on our street. One of the neighbors told me Lou T had been murdered. To think that something like this would have happened to Lou T was beyond sad. Lou was friendly. She was funny.
Lou T. Harris is a fascinating woman. She had grown up in Vietnam, and she was actually airlifted out of Saigon when it fell. She married an American man, and she made a life for herself here in Texas.
In 2018, Lou was living by herself. Her husband had already passed away. So you never really thought about, we need to make sure if she needs something, because she always gave you the complete sense of independence.
The day after the arrest of Billy Schmiermeyer, my partner and I go to Dallas PD and go speak with Billy Schmiermeyer in their interview room.
Detective Triviate. Plano Police.
Good. Martinez.
Billy Schmiermeyer was just like a happy person, not a worry.
Been a busy night, hasn't it?
It is.
It is.
When Billy Schmiermeyer was initially arrested, it was only for a Class C public intoxication. But that allows them to take him into custody and ask him questions about anything they want to. At some point after that, if they believe there's enough evidence to charge him with something else, they can.
Those people scared me yesterday, the officers. I was like, I thought that looked like a movie. And I was like, is this real? Oh, it's real.
No, and our thought process going into this is we're not going to probably get a confession from him.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
We just wanted him to talk and see what nuggets of evidence that we could use against him.
You're telling me that your phone stays with you?
Yeah.
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 No one else has that phone?
No.
When Billy Chamirmir is being detained, shockingly, he agrees to voluntarily give them his cell phone. Maybe because at that time he didn't realize that would also give the investigators access to his text messages, any photos he had on his phone, and also his GPS locations.
So Monday would be the 19th.
Yeah.
Or what'd you do that morning?
Oh, that morning I went to meet this guy on, I had a ring and to sell to this guy on, they're on 75 and Coit. There's a Starbucks there.
March 19th, when Mary Bartell was attacked and possibly Ann Conklin, he told us, he did go sell a ring. He went to Starbucks, but stayed up and down that he was never at Preston Place in the morning. He was at home at the time.
You know the Preston Place is basically adult living center?
Your phone is telling us that you're there too.
No.
When we did legal process and got his cell phone records and got his location data, that was absolutely a lie.
If you're involved in this or not?
No, I'm okay.
And he was professing that he was innocent, not worried that he did anything wrong, that evidence was showed that he did nothing wrong. And it was like, okay, do you mind giving us your DNA?
Are you allowing us to get the buckle swab?
Yeah. Okay. So okay with that? Voluntarily giving that to us?
Sure.
Make sure you're okay with that.
I am very okay. Anything in there, fingerprints, lie detector test.
Okay.
After talking to Billy Chamirmir, he was charged with the capital murder of Lou T. Harris and the attempted murder of Mary Bartell.
I want the truth.
I don't even need a lawyer, and I did not do any wrong.
Morning, police.
How you doing? Yeah. Martinez.
Billy Chamirmir is under arrest for the attacks and murders of elderly women in Dallas and Plano, Texas. But they want to build their cases and find more evidence to make the cases even stronger.
Early in the morning, the time we were interviewing Billy Chamirmir, Dallas PD was wrapping up their crime scene investigation in Lou T. Harris's home. They found that there was a receipt that showed a nearby Walmart and her making a purchase prior to her death, which led them to Walmart to investigate that further. And learned that Billy Chamirmir was also at that same Walmart just prior to Lou T. Harris being killed in her home. It is suspected that Billy Chamirmir is at that Walmart hunting for victims. He's scoping out Lou T. Harris, doing some surveillance on her, looking for opportunity, and to determine if this is going to be someone he can victimize.
As you have detectives working on the cases in Plano and in Dallas, the investigators become aware of yet another case in Richardson, Texas. Mary Brooks died 2 months prior to the first cases.
Mary Brooks was an 87-year-old woman who was living in the Dallas area. On January 31st, 2018, Mary Brooks's grandson gets a call from his mother, who's worried about her mother, and she asks him to check on her. And the grandson found that his grandmother was dead.
I was just gonna do one last look. Didn't hurt just to make sure I didn't see any suspicious wounds or anything.
There were groceries all out on her counters. They hadn't been put away. Her family discovered missing jewelry. And there was a receipt that showed that she had been on a shopping trip to Walmart.
Richardson PD's investigation led him to the same Walmart that Lou T. Harris was at. She was grocery shopping on the day she was killed, but they didn't have a suspect at that time until we learned of Billy Chamirmir, Walmart, and Lou T. Harris. So then Richardson PD started to look, okay, can we put Billy Chamirmir at the Walmart? When Mary Brooks was there, Richardson PD was able to show In the video, Billy Schmimmer was parked in relation to where Mary Brooks was parked. And when Mary Brooks returned to her car, you see the silver Nissan Altima, which is believed to be Billy Schmimmer's vehicle, exit with her and follow behind her. And shortly after is when she was found deceased. We met with Dallas PD, Richardson PD, Frisco PD. They also had some stuff that they were very interested in Billy Schmimmer being their person of interest. And when we looked at it, it's like, okay, let's look at the location data. Can we put Billy Schmimmer there? Oh, we can. We're jumping from cases to cases, and 4 or 5 cases quickly jumped to almost 10 cases. And it spiderwebbed from that point.
On July 16th, 2018, there was a phone message from a task force that was investigating a killer who went around to independent living properties. My mother, Doris Gleason's death was being investigated as a homicide. It took my breath away. On Sunday, October 30th, 2016, I drove over to pick my mother up for church. I get to the door. The door is unlocked. I walk in and see her on the floor over by the dining room table, and she was gone. She was 92. I felt shock, sadness, a bit of devastation. I had never experienced a death like that. And then when I hear that Mama had been murdered, I am floored.
The detective who was working the Schmimmer case called me to go and look at pictures of jewelry that they'd gotten off of Billy Schmimmer's phone. We asked the detective, are you implying that you think that Billy Schmimmer killed our mother? And he said, I'm convinced of it. He said, I've already pulled records from his cell phone, and his cell phone was in the vicinity of her house on Saturday and on Sunday morning before you found her dead. Suddenly you find out she's died violently, and you start the grieving process all over again. And now you're grieving a violent death.
While Billy Schmimmer is in custody, 4 different police departments are already working on all these investigations, and the number is now up to 22 different victims. This makes Billy Schmimmer one of the most horrendous, prolific serial murders in Texas history. But will there be enough evidence on any one of these cases to actually convict him?
When the case first came into our office, there was talks about that we might have a serial killer that is preying on elderly individuals. To be honest with you, I didn't think it would turn into the volume of cases that it actually turned into. I just didn't think that was possible. In the end, he had 22 indictments for capital murder and 2 indictments for attempted capital murder out of not only our county, Dallas County, but also including Collin County. It is a lot. Just had total disregard for human life. And then judicial economy, in the end, you can't try all of these cases. We had what we believed the strongest case with the Lou T. Harris. Mr. Schmimmer was found with her property hours after being with her. We went back and found him at Walmart at the same time. And so that became a very strong case for us circumstantially.
Having Mama's case not being tried was incredibly frustrating, but I also recognize the need for the strongest case. The goal was to get those convictions. And if that wasn't my mom's case, then okay.
I was brought on to Billy's case and became one of his 3 attorneys. I was intrigued in regards to the facts and allegations in and of itself, and then just the sheer number of indictments that were coming out against Mr. Schmimmer. No matter the number of indictments or charges against him, he's simply accused. And that's what we have to make the jury aware of, is until they decide something different, meaning that the state has proven its case to each and every one of them, beyond a reasonable doubt. He's just simply accused of these offenses.
The challenges in this case are, let's be honest, the amount of evidence was overwhelming. Was it circumstantial? Yeah, but what a lot of circumstantial evidence. That being said, you still have to present that evidence very understandably, very concisely. And the other big challenge you always have is you still have to pick your jury, and you better not pick one bad juror.
Our goal in this case was to see that Billy Chemirmir died in prison. In these types of cases for the death penalty, we would have to go to Kenya. We would have to do those types of things to do a good full background on him. That was unavailable to us. It was unavailable to the defense. And we would have to have delayed it even further. And we needed to get resolution to this case.
In the morning, jury selection will begin in Dallas for the trial of an alleged serial killer. That is Billy Chemirmir. The pandemic is going to prevent victims' families from witnessing his trial in person.
The whole scenario was just different. We were not allowed to have anybody in the courtroom that was not part of the trial. The victims' families, they couldn't face the person who had done this to their loved one. They had to watch it like everybody else did through closed-circuit television.
If I'm on a jury in COVID time and the family members have to come in one by one with masks on to testify, that's not going to have the same impact as seeing a courtroom full of cops and victims' family members and people watching the trial. They didn't get the real feel of anybody's pain or anguish or frustration.
In opening statement, I really just want to tell the jury kind of a glimpse of what they're going to see, what they're going to hear, and how I believe the case is going to be set out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about stalking, smothering, and stealing. When it came time to presenting evidence to the jury, we really wanted to show that there was a close connection to Billy Chemirmir and Miss Harris. When the Plano Police Department arrested Billy Chemirmir, he had in his hands the jewelry of Lutie Harris. And I used family members to identify those items and say, yes, I recognize those as being things that she was wearing. You know any reason why she would get rid of these things?
No, those were her personal items that she wore every day.
We then present cell phone data showing Mr. Chemirmir's actions, placing him at locations that link directly to Lou Harris. We relied heavily on the FBI in putting together our mapping of the pattern of Billy Chemirmir on these days. Typically, he would go to a location where there is a victim. He would stay there for a certain amount of time, pick his victim, murder them, take their jewelry. Then he would travel down to a known location where you could sell these items and then head back home.
On the cell phone records, we see here March 15th, March 19th, and March 20th.
Yes, sir.
So the response to this state, asserting that Billy was at these locations by way of the cell phone data, what their expert is able to say is that the device that they believe belonged to Billy Chemirmir was pinged or located in certain areas, but they cannot say that it was actually Billy himself. It's simply the device.
The defense's strategy in this case, with the overwhelming amount of evidence that there was to try to create reasonable doubt. You try to poke holes in each witness little by little and argue reasonable doubt. In this case, you would think that's a stretch because there was so much evidence, but sometimes that tactic works.
In criminal trials, using evidence of other crimes or bad acts is generally not admissible. However, it can be for limited purposes. In this case, it was more for motive and identity, since no one actually saw him kill anyone. But we wanted them to know that this same person with the same profile and the same similar acts had been with other women who were killed. This is the correct person. We have the right person.
Would you raise your right hand, please?
We decided to go with Mary Bartell because she brings to this case a voice for all the victims. She is the victim who survived, and she was able to tell her story through deposition.
I heard this very insistent rapping at the door. The door was opening inward, and when I My eyes were just fixated on these green rubber gloves. I knew instantly, number one, I should not have opened the door. Number two, my life was in grave danger. He just smashed a pillow down hard over my face and my chest, and I just couldn't breathe.
The defense lawyer was able to cross-examine her in her deposition the same way he would have in the courtroom before COVID happened.
She said the individual that walked in was very articulate and very well spoken, and asked about an accent. She said she didn't recall hearing an accent.
You didn't notice any kind of accent or anything about his voice that stood out to you?
No, I was just mainly concerned about whether I could get some help before I died.
And anyone that's ever heard Billy speak, he has a very thick accent. And that's important. The jury needs to understand that that's important.
Did you ever look at his face?
I was fixated by the green rubber gloves.
Okay, so you never did get a look at his face?
No, I did not.
There was nothing that placed him there except for Mary Bartell. And so if you think she's mistaken or that credibility is not as high as what you would like it to be as a juror, then you set that case aside and ask yourself, is the evidence sufficient to prove that it was Billy beyond all reasonable doubt?
We wanted to show Mr. Chemirmir's interrogation video because Billy Chemirmir did not have a good story as to why he's in possession of Lou T. Harris's items. He stated that he acquired them from a man on the side of the road. He couldn't give us the man's name. It just seems so illogical that he is at Walmart with Lou T. Harris and then happens to buy from some random man her items hours later and is caught with them.
You had their money. You had their jewelry, and you had their jewelry box.
I believe them playing his statement backfired a little bit. And the reason I say that is because he gave himself a defense.
Do you think that the items are stolen?
That was what I was thinking, because I was like, why is he bringing all this, the box with everything?
Way too many times in my career, when I was getting ready for trial, I would tell my main detective, I'm not going to offer your interview of the defendant. And they would get very upset. And I would say, no, it's self-serving. He doesn't tell the whole truth. He minimizes his involvement. He acts like it's self-defense. Why would I offer his version of what happened? By presenting the videotaped interview of Billy Chemirmir, the state allowed that to be his way of putting his defense on. And they weren't able to cross-examine him at the same time because he never had to testify. And the state doesn't get to say, we call Billy Chemirmir to the stand. It's not up to them. If he chooses not to testify, that's the end of his story.
That's what this entire case is about, is reasonable doubt. And it is rampant.
There was so much evidence that they had introduced.
You've seen an exorbitant amount of evidence and items put in, but we're talking about quality and not quantity.
And that was my argument, is they're presenting all these things, but what is the quality of this evidence in regards to them meeting their burden?
In this day and age, with what juries expect today with modern forensics, which I'm so sick of hearing, there's no such thing as too much evidence. I wish we could all have that problem.
This is the first time in my career as a prosecutor I've been accused of bringing too much evidence. It was mentioned a couple of times that this is going to be a difficult chore on your part. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think it's going to be that difficult. Once we concluded closing statements, the case is in the jury's hands. We just have to wait now for their answer.
I happened to be there in the courthouse, and the evidence was so well laid out. So we were expecting 30 minutes later the jury to come back. And as that jury waited and waited and waited and then went home to come back the next day, we were very concerned.
And it went a little longer and kept going a little longer. And I said, well, somebody's back there thinking.
This case should have been a slam dunk, and you would expect a quick verdict. But it took over 2 days. The jury was still deliberating, and they still hadn't come up with a verdict.
After several notes that were sent out by the jury, they were deadlocked, unable to reach a verdict.
Judge Jones, we remain deadlocked at 11-1. After additional deliberation, we received no change.
Then I moved and requested a mistrial, and it was granted.
Mistrial has occurred, or a hung jury has occurred.
We are just disappointed that they could not come to the correct and obvious.
I don't have a word to describe the unfairness, the injustice.
Given that Lou T. Harris's case was, by the prosecutor's judgment, their strongest case, and they got a hung jury, they had to have been devastated when they got that back. Unfortunately, what all those family members learned is with the jury, you never know what's going to happen.
When I heard of the mistrial, I was disappointed for the families and immediately started thinking about participating in the second trial.
The elected DAs in big counties have a huge office to run. 300 lawyers work for them. So when the DA, John Creuzot, comes aboard to try the case with Glenn Fitzmartin, that's a big deal.
We went into the second trial terrified of another mistrial.
I think there was also resolve on the part of the families to come back and make sure that we did whatever we could to help the DA to close that case on the next time through.
In the second trial, the COVID restrictions have lessened a little bit, so we're now able to put the courtroom back to the way we're used to it, where spectators are allowed in, family members are allowed in.
The court was filled with so many families from other victims feeling like that may be their day in court, and certainly hoping for justice for Lucci, but also justice for their family members also.
I've been licensed for 42 years, and I was a judge for 22 years, so I saw a lot of cases tried. To me, voir dire is probably the most important part of the case.
Voir dire, it's not the glamorous part, but it's the part where you better not get it wrong, because if you do, one juror can ruin everything. In this case, they had to voir dire question a whole big group of people at the same time, and then to decide how many strikes they were going to use against how many people.
So looking back after we had a hung jury, I thought that we could do better in the jury selection process. I think the art of jury selection is understanding what your issues and problems are and being able to fashion a voir dire that helped them understand exactly what the law was. For example, circumstantial evidence, and helping them understand that circumstantial evidence does not mean weak evidence, and committing to, if we prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt with circumstantial evidence, they could return a verdict of guilty.
It makes me crazy that too many people think that circumstantial evidence cases are weak, because they're not, and they never have been, and they never will be. Because every little piece points to the same thing, and every little piece is the truth. And when you put them all together, how beautiful can that be?
The main difference in this trial is that you do not see the taped police interview with Billy Shamir.
I didn't go to anybody's apartment.
When they didn't play the interview at the arrest, that was a game changer, because that way he wasn't able to spew his lies without any cross-examination.
During the closing argument, District Attorney Creuzot linked the evidence back to what he had talked to the jurors about in his voir dire in the selection of the jury.
I told them we're counting on them to do what they promised under oath that they would do, and reminding them of the issues that we went over with them, especially circumstantial evidence. If you had said no, you wouldn't be on this jury. We brought you the evidence, and the only thing left is your job to deliberate, follow the law, and in our opinion, return a verdict of guilty.
The argument it's still beyond a reasonable doubt, that it's extremely circumstantial. Argument is still that there's no direct evidence placing him in the home of Lou T. Harris. There's no direct evidence placing him on the street of Miss Harris. There's no direct evidence even in the extraneous case that places him in Miss Bartell's home or neighborhood.
At the end of all the closing arguments, I think there's a healthy amount of anxiety in everybody in the courtroom, especially the families, because they've watched this not turn out well a few months before. And for me, I know, because of 42 years of practicing law, that I have no idea what they're going to do.
This was a stunningly fast verdict for a capital murder trial. Jury deliberated less than an hour.
It's like pins and needles. It's high anxiety. But we had the rug pulled out from us before, so our trust is really low that this is going to be okay.
The jury has reached a verdict, and that verdict is: we, the jury, unanimously find the defendant guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
Billy Chimera was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And I knew at that moment in time that Billy Chimera would die in prison.
I have goosebumps when the jury renders the conviction that he is guilty. There is such a flood of relief.
On behalf of the many victims, we are incredibly relieved that justice is finally here, especially after the mistrial 5 months ago.
There was a lot of relief and joy that justice had finally been done.
About time. Why did it take two? But everybody's just as happy as can be that he's never going to get out of prison.
I look at Lucci's death and could sound strange, but I think that she would be proud to know that she ended all of that, all of those killings, that was the end. After her, that was it. And they got him.
Well, what was satisfying about this verdict was that Mr. Shamir had announced to a news station that he would never go to the penitentiary. And when that verdict came back, of course, I looked at him. He didn't have much expression, but I thought, you're on your way, buddy.
I think the whole experience has got us both thinking about how to protect elderly people.
When I worked through that, Mama was the 8th victim in 3.5 months, and that this had happened at 3 other well-respected properties in the Metroplex. That's when I knew that something had to change. Secure Our Senior Safety is a nonprofit foundation committed to showing the vulnerabilities in independent senior living and hopefully correcting those vulnerabilities. SOSS is proud that we got 2 bills through on legislation to change the security in independent living. My mother was incredibly private, and that was a real big struggle for me in the beginning. She believed a lady's name was in the paper when she got married and when she died. And so for my mother's face to be splattered everywhere in her name, my mother would not like that. But over time, I think Mama understands my commitment to make her friends safer than she had been. And in that way, I think she's proud of it.
Can you imagine the impact and the horror that came on over 20 different families because of all the people that Billy Shamir murdered? I think the good that came of this is that those facilities have made stronger safeguards. Some laws have changed to try and ensure that that keeps happening. And let's hope that when we have our grandparents and parents and even us go into places like that from now on, they're way more protected as a result of what happened in this case.